All right, here she is. So we're going to put those knobs in the dish there. We have to remove the pinch wheel. This is the capstan, that's the pinch wheel. And we need to remove these knobs. I did work on the clutch over here. On this clutch, I loosened them up a bit so they don't over tighten the tapes and stretch the tapes. Right, you want to be careful. These are very special shaped screws inside here and you don't want to lose those. So we're going to put this plug goes through there. Basically we bring this thing here, we lift this and we slide. Oh, before we actually put this in the box, we removed 2 strips. And I think it might be easier if we remove these screws. We can clean this lid, but we can also put our hand in there. This is quite dusty and gritty and dirty. Okay, right. So it does not want to go back in the box. And the reason why it doesn't want to go back in the box is I put these bits of felt here because these tables, these fancy tables, tend to scratch quite easily. So to prevent the table from getting scratched, I put these felt feet on, and you can see even in this short time they've kind of rubbed and pressed and compressed flat. So this is just yellow electrical insulation tape, PVA insulation tape from Nitto or Hellerman. I'm just removing that sticky gooey mess because there's nothing worse than having sticky gooey mess all over things. We just have to turn that round. Oh, and this is upside down. So now it should just slide back in here. You see how quickly that gets dirty. This piece should now slide back in here. You see, like that. But what is missing here, this is where my finger gets caught in there. But what's missing now there are 2 strakes or strips. This side has got countersunk holes. So let's just zoom out a bit. So obviously we need to do a little bit of figuring out here. It's always a good idea to keep copious notes. When dismantling equipment, take lots of photographs. So this one is on this side, and this one, here's your countersinks, and we can see this hole and this hole have been used, and it's different on both sides. So on this side, that hole was used, and that hole was used, and you can see there's been a screw in there, there's been a screw in there. Right, so this is our box of fasteners for this particular machine, and there's also maybe a few other bits and pieces. Notice how, because we've slid this thing into this box, it's raised this chassis up a bit, because if you try to reattach these and this is out of this box, these clash with the table and it becomes quite awkward. So let's do this. Let's find a screwdriver. Always test your screwdriver and try to use a screwdriver that's got no wiggle or doesn't feel loose in the screw. So that feels good. If it feels good, it is good, and it's less likely to strip the head of your screw. There we can see that hole was used before, because there are holes here that were never used. Then that's obviously not the correct place. So we're putting this here like this and there. And when you screw screws, there's nothing worse than working on a machine where somebody has let the screwdriver slip. You want to push in very hard and screw firmly, and you don't ever want to let the screwdriver jump. You don't want it to jump in the head. There, I just did it. And that's what you don't want to do. So that is now firmly screwed on there. And obviously we need to make sure that this is fitting properly like that, but before we push it all the way in, we want to find this piece and put this on this side, and these should actually be in that lid over there so they don't roll away and disappear. So now we're putting this over here, that over there, and there's a hole that has been used before, and here. So almost every part on this machine is unique. So those rubbing strakes or strips hold this thing in place, you see. These feet go here, so we're putting that in and we're not tightening it all the way up. Now before we tighten everything up completely, we want to lay the machine like this, and we want to understand what's happening and does the cover fit on. So here is the cover that we cleaned, and now that's quite interesting because you'll see we need to pull that a little bit like that, and we need to pull this a little bit. Be careful. Aluminium is susceptible to bending, so while I'm doing what I'm doing now, I'm being very careful, and notice how these switches need to come through. That's your pause button, and there's a fastener hole there, fastener hole there, fastener hole there, and we just want to make sure that things are lining up and there's nothing weird going on, but this looks quite good actually. This is the faceplate. Wow, look at that. The condition of these screws wasn't great, so I may be replacing them, but you can't just put any screws in here. You've got to get a screw that looks the part as well. And there's a little bit of scuffing and whatting, but in general this machine is in the most extraordinary condition. If the screwdriver jumps, stop using that one and find a proper screwdriver. 5, and I'm looking for number 6, and I seem to remember that number 6 was an odd man out, didn't match. Right, so this screw here is an odd man out. Doesn't match these, but it looks, maybe, I don't know. Now, if the screw threads, you can get coarse threads and fine threads. Don't force things, folks, don't force things. So you can try it, you can see, does it fit? So just like that. Now you see there, it's binding up, so don't keep going because you're going to strip. The screw itself is not important, but the part that's under there, if you strip that, that's a disaster. So don't do it. So let's just put the actual screw there. Okay, so that one runs fine. So this one has got a different thread. This is probably an American thread, and this is probably a fine metric thread. Right, this is a very important little detail. When you put a machine back together and now it's rattling, that would be because you haven't put little details like this in. So this is a little spacer on the headphone socket, and it's details like that that prevent a machine from starting to rattle. Sometimes a detail like that is simply cosmetic, but sometimes it's also to do with not rattling. So these little screws, I'm going to leave that one out because I don't want to put any old screw in here and strip that thread. So these are the proper screws. These screws have got little bits of corrosion on them, so the easiest thing to do there for me, if I cannot find a similar screw with a similar thread, is just to paint them matte black, spray paint them matte black. You could use gun blacking or something like that to do the work. What we're going to do is we're turning it back up, and there's supposed to be little plastic spacer washers that protect this, and just there. So let me go find those. I use blue tack to prevent them from disappearing forever. Again, use a screwdriver that fits properly into the screw head. These need to be tightened pretty tight, but don't tighten them so tight that you break the castings or strip the screws, but they do need to be firm. This we're going to need to make a plan over there, and we have the cover here. So this is the wheel, and this was slipping against the capstan a little bit, so I ran a diamond, a very fine diamond grit sharpener on that. But that's, you've got to be careful. You don't want to do stuff that you end up having to replace the part. You can get replacements for these. But there it is there. Then we need to put the cover on, and for now we're going to leave that off. We're going to put the cover on, and we're going to return the knobs here, and then we're going to test run the machine. This simply slides onto those two posts. We need to re-black this and do a little bit of cosmetic work to make that look better. This goes over here. It's got a very odd sized little Allen key in there, so we're going to leave this off for the moment. When you're putting the knobs on, let's just zoom out slightly. So this one is interesting. When you pull that out, that's mono, that's stereo. We haven't cleaned these controls, but there don't seem to be a lot of problems with these controls. What you can do is you can turn this all the way clockwise, and then you put this on, that you line up this line with that line. Before you push it all the way on, you want to spin it like this, and it's a bit too fast, so we need to move it one spline back to there, and it's a process of doing that until you're satisfied that this corresponds to that scale, like there. That's fine. And then you might be seeing a bit of parallax with the angle of the camera there, and then this one also has a marking there. We're going to do a little bit of cosmetic work on these knobs in another video, and there we go. So that one, we want to come, whoa, okay, that's interesting. That is exactly what happened here. So we're going to have to rebond this beautiful aluminium cover onto that plastic part that fits on the splines. Let's not worry about that for now. I've made a mental, you see there, I've made a mental note of that problem, and I'll show the glue that I use, but for now we just don't use too much force on that knob, so that knob's all good, and we just situate them in the 12 o'clock position, and whoops, that's rolling away there. Now look how pretty that looks. Okay, so now pretty much okay, that's missing, this is missing, this is missing. We have that. We're going to make a plan for that, which I'll talk about. But look at this. This is a very pretty looking tape recorder, and we're going to run it now, but I just wanted to tighten up the feet here and clean this and put this back. And there's a little bit of dust and grit here that I'm going to clean with a toothbrush still. We could polish these details. There's quite a lot of cosmetic work that we can do, but this machine is pretty much good to go. It's good to run for another how many years. But if you look at the list, there's still stuff that we are going to do as time permits and as making video time permits. So there it is. Wow, that's a real classic from the 1970s. Right folks, so there it is. You're basically looking at a piece of equipment that's been restored to working order, and I think that sounds like Frankie Sinatra. Right folks, so here it is. You can see that it's working beautifully. We've got a lovely little Akai amplifier. These actually match in color. Right, so we're going to get a copyright strike if I don't talk over the music. So let's have a look, see. There we go. So that's play and stop. We need a pause button. and we can fast forward. No issues there. On the rewind, okay. Okay, so that's your fast forward. On the rewind with the covers off, so that's a bit strange. Something must be rubbing, because with the covers off, the braking on the rewind was going to need some adjusting. Now it's working, and that's the amazing thing about these machines. Let's fast forward it. This is an old multimeter, so it's got ohms, it's got amps, milliamps, volts, AC volts, and it's got amazing, wonderful, beautiful Nixie tubes in here. It does work. It's not running right now because the cable is at home, but we're going to have a look at this. But what we're also going to have a look at, and let's just zoom out for a moment. So what we're also going to look at are these tape recorders. So this is another 4000 series deck from Akai. I acquired it last night. It hasn't run for probably 30 years. Very dusty, beautiful deck. Then what we've got here, this is a very, very nice thing. This is the last generation of reel-to-reels. This is a TIAC X300R with auto reverse and a whole host of beautiful features. So that's coming up very soon. And then we've got this beauty here, and this is another Akai. This is an Akai 265D. It's a GX glass head, glass ferret head. It's a Akai GX 265D. So hopefully you'll keep coming back to the channel. Maybe you want to subscribe and like some stuff. I actually have two of these beauties, and these Nixie tubes were used on the space program NASA in America, and I think by the Russians as well. So we've got some beautiful nostalgic stuff coming up. So thank you very much for watching the videos. I see the videos are getting a bit of a response, and please do comment, make suggestions. How can we do what we do better, or what issues are you having in particular that we might have a solution for?